brief introduction as to who you are, what you do, and then maybe what is a pilot for you?
I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, I already had the pleasure to introduce myself and our company Xapix in detail. Why I'm excited about this panel, just very briefly. I used to work on the other side. We built Lufthansa's Innovation Hub in Berlin, where I led the API topics out there, and then sort of slowly shifted to the other side. To address your question, what is in a pilot? Usually for us, a pilot is actually the second step. We usually start with something we would call a POC. A POC lasts around anything between 3 to 12 weeks with a partner, where you initially, as the term states, prove out your value. And then as a next step, a pilot is already, in that sense, a rollout, maybe in a specific geographical region. And then you go from there in the partnership.
Hi, I'm Wolfram from Talanx. Very happy to be here. I'm project leader in the strategy department of Talanx Germany. So I'm representing the German part of Talanx worldwide. We are a mid-sized company in Germany focusing on life and P&C products. Yeah, my job is, in a nutshell, to coordinate our fintech cooperation with Plug and Play, as well as classical project management and strategy subjects, operative stuff, as well as strategy development. What is a POC? It's a good question. Sometimes, if you take a look what happens in our company, everything is a POC, which fails. So normally a POC is when it comes through a process we call CDO pitch. So when we get to the point that an idea is presented to our CDOs and our head of strategy, and then they say go, and then they get 100,000 euro, 3 months of time, and go into our DigiLab. And there a POC is really proved and yeah, trying to put into reality. And after 3 months you can really then judge whether it's successful or not. So I would call that a POC, but there are many other definitions. I don't think that there's only the one right one.
I'm sure we're about to hear 2 more.
Hello, my name is Sibyl Fischer. I'm responsible for corporate venturing at Baloise Group. We teamed up by corporate venturing with Anthemis, which is a London-based VC. But I'm also part of group strategy and digital transformation team at Baloise, so overseeing most of Baloise innovation initiative. We also called as mid-sized insurance company, even if we are much smaller than Talanx, but that's probably because we're Swiss-based and medium-sized means something else on Swiss standards. For me personally, pilot is a test, or both-sided test from startup and the corporate, if a long-standing relationship makes sense. And it's also a trial if we can learn something or how we can cooperate. So we call it sometimes it's an MVP to see what happens after a few weeks of piloting.
Yeah, hi. So from our point of view, at the end of the day, we have to give evidence of the business case behind what we provide. And as a startup, often we're not known, or there's not built up certain sort of say knowledge and credibility in the market about what we do. So when we started, we engaged in POCs and pilots and what they were called. But our learning now is that we have actually removed those 2 words from our vocabulary. Because what happened is that a POC then stops the thinking process and then evaluation, and then it's built on less good infrastructure, and it wasn't really giving the right numbers, and then there's often a pause before then it's being rebuilt and set up one more time, and that is a way to lose time. So in order to win time to market, both for ourselves but also for our clients, we now do what is called a build. And a build is a real production model with all the data, all the configuration, etc. And at the end of that build, we give a formalized business case. And if the client decides to continue, It's right on, production day one. If the client doesn't continue, well, there's nothing lost. So I think those words, pilot and POC, sometimes can slow down this agile process that we're all trying to be part of.
Okay, so I guess building then a bit, Bo, on what you said, and maybe Wolfram as well. So we get the impression here that it's quite hard to secure ultimately a pilot, maybe proof of concept, and then recurring revenue stream. So considering that something like 80% of probably people in the room here think that partnering with startups is essential to corporate innovation, why is it so hard to secure that initial project and then convert it?
I think one of the most important things is that we identify the business problem properly and what we need to achieve from a financial point of view, and that have that really bright on as a target, as an objective, and then breaking that down into the project. So for us, we drive savings. So that's what's put on the chart. We need to drive X% of additional savings, and then we break that down into a technical project and look at the data and so forth. I think that's the most important. And then secondly, from a contractual point of view, to lower the barrier of entry, so there's little risk to start with us as a startup. So there's no handcuffs, so to say, and lower risk, but increase value.
Anyone else anything to add? Maybe from the corporate side, why procurement or implementation is tricky, working with startups for an insurer?
You got a big problem with normally integrating new products in the value chain, as well as in the legacy systems. And this is the reason we try to really focus on, okay, either it is a POC and it is completely not integrated into our legacy systems. For example, we do it within Standa. I think I can mention it at this point. New products within Standa, hey, great. But at this point, when we understand, okay, it can work and there's a market, then the integration process starts. And just to give you a number, normally you say, okay, a new product in legacy systems is worth 10 million of integration costs. For example, within Standa, there are other offers in the market. It's a 10% of it or something. So you really have to differentiate between new product in legacy systems and new product, offsite.
Bo, were you going to add something? I guess then maybe let's think about who you're selling into in the organization and identifying perhaps who your internal stakeholder is. So Christian, perhaps, how have you gone about identifying who that is, and are you going always through one channel, or are you A/B testing different routes and maybe taking experience from other sectors that you've looked at?
Yeah, so for us, it's it's I would say in mainly three different areas. Obviously, when you sell a software solution, you're selling to the IT department, and for us, the solution architects, IT architects are an important stakeholder. They're usually not the first ones to reach because they're not necessarily the ones showing up at events like this today. So before that, it's the innovation managers, which essentially for us and for I guess for Shift and for the other startups as well, we have to turn you into our initial champions to get to those internal departments. Then to find both IT, but also those who bring the business case internally, because this will be someone maybe from the marketing, from the sales side, who essentially is then pushing IT into a direction. And the magic happens when you have that triangle in that sense. It's a process which definitely takes some time. It's a little bit, depending on how aggressive you play it, it is a lot of network building, where if you think about it, like a network can easily expand into maybe 30, 40, 50 people within each organization. If you're really at the point where you have your first customer and you manage to expand into a range of other areas. And that becomes quite an interesting network to juggle in that sense. And I think it's crucial for startups in the B2B space to be aware of that, to leverage every opportunity they have, everything from LinkedIn to face-to-face events to really spin that up. And in the end, timing decides about a lot of our fate and success. Whether maybe there's a new CEO coming in, is pushing a specific topic, and suddenly there's a hype and things go really fast, or it's in that sense business as usual. And I think the challenge that we have to fight against is that maybe events like today are seen as business as usual at some point, because we have to jointly, in that sense, help create a certain hype curve that you're coming back, you're getting really good messages here, taking those to your organization, and there's a certain excitement about the things that are happening next. Because otherwise what we're going to see is that we're going back to sort of being a messenger of things that are happening, but then we start working together 1 year down the road. And I think what Plug and Play has successfully shown in other programs as well, and I think the Batch Zero here is a learning in that sense, where like how do you drive down that time to start working together, and how do you make sure that for Batch 1, like you have 15 companies up here which all have a success story to share of what they worked on in the past few months, like what POC they brought out. And I think for that, like bringing people together is crucial, but creating that hype curve among that is the next step.
So, Bo, maybe quickly over to you. We've heard about the trifecta used at Zappix for targeting people internally. What's your kind of secret for that?
As I started out talking about is so to say the business value is very, very important. And we're actually linking that into our product development, so that every time we decide how a product feature or a new thing is being developed, that it actually drives savings. So main contacts are head of claims and head of fraud. Essentially that's what we are focusing on. And we have designed the solution so that we don't require to work a lot with IT. It's only a data transfer. And that means that we're removing complexity of old-fashioned procurement processes, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, we have to comply with certain security standards, et cetera, but that's standardized in Europe so far. So we link the identification of the key stakeholders with the value proposition and then to the product development, and that's kind of the triangle we work with.
Got it. And then I guess maybe, Sibyl, if we move to you and think about, these guys are trying to break in from the kind of external viewpoint. How do you internally manage all the different stakeholders? Obviously, we know that startups often get frustrated because they want to move very quickly, but we know that because you guys are large organizations and have all these different teams, it takes a bit longer. So what's kind of the secret to aligning everyone, and what are the things that typically stop you?
I mean, that's the big challenge, but I mean, we do the administrative stuff in our team, but the big challenge for the startups is to convince the business, and that it's always easy to convince the business with how they are, or to understand their problem and showing them what you can solve for them, having less fraud, better KPIs because they are steered by KPIs, making more business or having less claims or less costs. So if you can show them how you will reach that together with them, I think it's the easiest way to convince them to start a project with you.
Wolfram, any learnings from your side?
Well, I completely agree. That is a huge coordination issue of getting both sides, the business side and the strategy side on one fintech scouting process. Therefore, I'm representing the corporate side today, so let me just quickly elaborate on how we do the process. Maybe it could be, there could be learnings for the other ones as well. So we try to make it really easy, a really easy process that we set up in a project over 3 months, led by the strategy team. And in the end, there was called a DG roadmap process, where we very clearly said, okay, what is the process from the beginning of an idea, from the first contact in Munich or in Silicon Valley with the fintech, until the going live for the customer. And we structured it very clearly. We communicated it very densely within the whole corporate group. And everyone knows it in Talanx Germany. So we are working on it that everyone knows it. So it's a really important factor that people know this process, and we have decentral so-called innovation ambassadors who drive this process in the business areas. And in the end, it's nothing less than it's a CDO pitch process. So every fintech with an idea has to find a business partner internally with us. And then they have to, in the end, fill up a formulate. It sounds really old school, but it's easy like that, like a template, where we say, okay, this is the idea, this is the focus, this is the objective, these are the target units. And then they pitch upfront our CDOs with a strategy lead. And in the end, there's a decision. And if they get a yes, they get the contact to our DigiLab internally in Hannover, where they got 3 months' time, 100,000 or 100K. And after 3 months, there's the decision in the board to really integrate it in the legacy systems, do another POC, or stop it. And yeah, I think it's not a big deal to inventing such a process. It's a big deal living it. So I could just advise you to say, okay, if you write it down, make people know it, try to learn from failures and mistakes you do in this process. Try not to do them twice. And try to live the process. And this is better for you as fintechs as well, because you only want to have 1 or 2 persons to talk to. You want to have a clear process, how we structure a POC. And to be honest, if you don't get a business partner in our units, then sometimes it's difficult, and it's better to get a clear answer like, okay, actually not or no, than, like maybe. And so, we try to live this process, but of course there's upside potential like in every topic, and but I think it's a good first step.
Of course, and I think we heard from Jörg earlier as well that, just give startups a quick answer, tell them what you're thinking, give them the feedback, because it might be a no, but at least make it a quick no. And I think, while we're on the topic of implementation and taking it a step further, I'd love to hear from everyone, both on the startup and again, corporate from you, Sibylle, about how the conversion from pilot to POC, or POC to pilot, to actually recurring revenue streams, what in your experience has been the best way to facilitate that stage from beginning to end, and what has worked well and maybe what hasn't worked well?
I'll give it a go. For actually the scenarios which from a startup perspective were most exciting were those where our customers had a very clearly defined roadmap of a problem that they want to tackle, and then they essentially had two, three companies competing in a POC. Those are the settings which are extremely valuable for a startup, because first of all, you get to compete with, in our case, a Microsoft or an SAP in that POC for an actual solution. And secondly, within the company, it's pretty clear that after 3 months, let's say, they're going to make a vendor decision. And at that point, it's either a yes or no. Both can be valuable. But then there's a step after that, and you don't get into this sort of in-between moment, which Bo, you hinted at, which is like, we met you guys, you were great, we did a fun POC, and then we'll see what happens next. But you actually have dedication from a department, and if you walk out and say, hey, we won against Microsoft in that, it's even better.
Bo, anything from your side, key tips to securing those recurring revenue?
Yeah, so far on all the builds that we have done, I call them built on purpose. I'm not allowed to say POC. Not a joke. So far on all the customers that we have, we did a build, and 100% of all the builds we did, they converted into a customer. So how does that happen? That happens because we get 3 to 5 years of data over, and we then do our analysis with our tools on that data. And for the business case, we then compare with what happened over the last 3 years in the business. So this is a fact. And we then show our result, and then it's a one-to-one comparison on where was more fraud found. And so far, we won all those little world championships on databases. So it's really data-driven. And hence, we could convert all of them to running customers. So it's very, very designed for that process.
And maybe just to dig into that briefly, so was there ever a period in which you were experimenting with a different type of approach beforehand, or from the beginning you always decided it would just be a build?
In the early beginnings, that's a couple of years ago, there were the process of PUC and pilot, and the vocabulary was there in the company. But about 18 months ago, we decided that we should do it differently, because we calculated we save 4 to 6 months of getting installed. So it's also 4 to 6 months of